Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter. Welcome again to the CPG Guys podcast. I'm PVSB, one of the aforementioned CPG guys. And while I'm usually joined by my colleague, Sri, the West Coast CPG guy, he's otherwise disposed today. So in his place, we have a supremely qualified substitute. He's the co-host of the weekly Gildenberg Omni Comment, seen Thursdays on the CPG Guys LinkedIn page. Please join me in welcoming Brian Gildenberg. Hey, Brian, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Peter. And for anybody our age or older, I can be the Joan Rivers to Shree's Johnny Carson anytime.
I look at you as more as the Jay Leno to the Johnny Carson, the next gen. But if you want to be Joan Rivers, knock yourself out. That's all good.
I'm going to go do that. I'll be right back.
And as I look at your background, I know you've got Fenway Park there.
I cannot do Shree's random Yankee fandom. So no, that's we'll be Yankees free today.
If anyone wants to know why Shri really isn't here, he's still in mourning over the elimination of the Yankees, which of course they got eliminated by a much better team, whereas the Dodgers, we lost to the Padres. I should be the one holding a grudge over the entire outcome, but I'm here. That's all I'm going to say. But thanks for joining, Brian. We've got a great conversation. All right. Before we get to our guests, I want to remind our audience that all of our content may be found by visiting cpgguys.com. And if you aren't already following us on LinkedIn, open up the app or go to the LinkedIn site. And when you get to the search box, enter CPG Guys. And when you get to our page, click follow. That way you see all of our content that we're producing, things like Brian's Omni Comment that happens on Thursdays, the Retail Media Minute on Tuesdays. And also consider joining one of the two closed groups we manage, CPG e-commerce and Retail Media Professionals. Collectively, they have over 2,000 members now. There are links to these in the digital liner notes of this podcast. We're also on other social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and increasingly we have a TikTok following. Who knew? But we do have a really great series on TikTok called Knowledge Drops, which is intended to be a fun way to learn about our industry. And remember to check out both the FMCG Guys, that's the CPG Guys platform over in Europe, hosted by our friends Daniel and Efrain. They take the CPG Guys podcast across the pond and speak to retail and FMCG luminaries from a European perspective. Just visit fmcgguys.com. Also, check out the latest addition to our family, the CPG Scoop, hosted by Jennifer and Risa. They conduct snackable conversations with industry veterans. It's a fun way to discover what's new and next in CPG commerce and marketing. Visit cpgscoop.com to learn more. And of course, we're proud to partner with Next Up, formerly known as Network of Executive Women, whose mission it is to advance all women in business and to promote the cause of gender equality and career development. In 2023, the CPG Guys will be supporter-level sponsors of Next Up, and we will be designating our 50 membership slots to women entrepreneurs and leaders who might benefit from Next Up's resources. Please visit nextupisnow.org/CPG Guys to learn more about this great group. All right, on to our episode today. Combining disparate data sets, 1P, 3P, and such, to deliver meaningful insights and drive activation is increasingly a necessary skill set for today's truly efficient omnichannel marketer. Our episode today is the second in which we've partnered with Habu, whose mission statement is unlock the true potential of data, connect to data wherever it lives, even across a disparate universe at an unparalleled scale. To decompose finding, activating, understanding, and measuring your success on the brand equity and growth journey, we have rejoining us Matt Kilmartin, the co-founder and CEO of Habu. And Matt has brought along one of Habu's premier clients. We've got Greg Carr, who's head of innovation of data and analytics, part of the strategy and transformation group at the iconic PepsiCo company. We should note that at the time of this recording, Kantar just released its annual power ranking, and for the 7th straight year, PepsiCo has topped the list of CPG manufacturers. Please join Ryan and me in welcoming Matt and Greg to the podcast. Gentlemen, welcome. How you doing?
Doing great, thanks. Thanks for having me again, and excited to have Greg here today too.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Doing great. Happy to be here.
All right, that's great. And before we get to the questions that Brian and I have prepared for the conversation, let's start with Matt. Would you please let our audience know, one, where on the web they can learn more about Habu? And would you give us a brief introduction to your company?
Yeah, sure thing. So, of course, we're on the web and on LinkedIn like you guys, habu.com. I'd also say there's a lot of great work being done by trade rags and publications around our industry right now. There was actually an article in the Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago about clean rooms. So there's a lot of great press out there. And so if you're reading about clean rooms, you're learning about Habu. But if you want to learn about Habu specifically, probably best to go to our website. And sort of in a nutshell, what we do, if you missed the last episode, we are a data clean room software company. What that means is we help brands like Pepsi with data-driven marketing use cases across this distributed data ecosystem. And so we have a lot of great customers doing innovative things, Pepsi being one of the most innovative. And I'm psyched that Greg's here today to share some of his perspective from the CPG side.
Thank you for that, Matt. And to our audience, now you understand that a clean room is very different than a safe room. So thank you for that, Matt. Hey, Greg, while the audience is going to be very familiar with PepsiCo and all your billion-dollar brands like Mountain Dew, Doritos, and what have you, would you let us know about your data analytics innovation group and your area of responsibility in the organization?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Peter. So the data and analytics group we just hit our 3rd year anniversary within PepsiCo. So we're a relatively new group for a company that's been around since 1898, right here in Newburgh, North Carolina, down the road from me. And so what data analytics is comprised of, we're centralizing and collaborating across the org and across the ecosystem. We have a strategy and ecosystems group, which my team lives within. We have a data operations group. We have a data governance group. We have a data science group. So we're a global team. We've grown massively. I was fortunate to be one of the early external hires on the PepsiCo team right as the pandemic was taking hold. So it was a sort of a very interesting time. We've grown from single digits to hundreds in that time, all post-pandemic. And with my team, I lead the innovation team. We're about a dozen people within the strategy and ecosystem group. And what my team does is focus on ways to drive value to the organization through collaborations and connectivity, both across PepsiCo and across the ecosystem. So working with our friends at Habu is a big part of that.
That's great, Greg. And before the show started, Greg and I were talking, and he mentioned the fact that when he was living in Brooklyn, it was his job to go up and turn on the big Pepsi-Cola sign light every evening on the East River. But don't worry, everybody, it still works because he's got someone on his team to handle it. I'm just kidding, but it's so good to have you, Greg. We're big fans of your business, and thank you for sharing that with us. We're going to include hyperlinks in the digital liner notes of this episode to both your LinkedIn profiles and the Habu site and the PepsiCo site. So for our audience, don't need to write any of this down. Just open up your mobile app, go to the liner notes and click the hyperlinks, and you can learn more about our guest today. So we've prepared a number of questions for you all today. Brian and I are going to get right to it, so I'm going to kick it off. Matt, why don't you help share with this group a little bit more about specifically what a clean room is, why it is needed by modern marketers, and how it comes to life in the transformation of data into actionable insights?
Yeah, sure thing. First, what a clean room is, because it's one of the great things about our industry, and one of the not so great things is when one of these terms take holds, everyone becomes one. I sort of equate it to the gold rush, right? And so everyone now says they're a clean room or says they offer clean room functionality. And so it gets confusing for brands. So hopefully today with Greg, we can sort of clarify some of it. So how I define a clean room is, think of it as really two parties that have data. There's a common business interest in sharing data, but for privacy reasons, for business reasons, you don't want to give each other your data. And so in a basic sort of CPG world, CPGs have great relationships with retailers who sell their products. They have great relationships with sports leagues. They have great relationships with CTV providers, but not everyone's giving Pepsi all that data. So that's really what a role a clean room plays, is how can partners partner around data in a privacy safe way when not everyone's sort of shipping their data to each other. So that's sort of what a clean room is. Why is it needed? I think, Peter, it's really a lot of these ecosystem challenges, which a lot of people sort of complain about in some ways, right? Oh, the death of the cookie. The reality is, and Brian said this up front, any of us who've been working in this industry long enough know that a lot of the technology for measurement and a lot of technology built around targeting, it was built on sort of brittle browser-based technology, right? It was built on cookies and mobile device IDs, and pixels were being shot all around the internet. And no one really understood where data was going, right? And so the reality is because of browsers changing the rules, because of walled gardens changing the rules, because of laws, right, that started in Europe, the byproduct of that is data is distributed. So why is it needed? Because the game's changed. Data is distributed. If you advertise with Google, get good at working with BigQuery. You advertise with Amazon, you better learn how to use Redshift, right? You do something with somebody else, like you need to be able to work across all these sort of different platforms. And so hopefully Greg will get into some use cases today, because I think what Pepsi's done is they took a real learning agenda way before anyone else did, and they've sort of learned by doing. And not just with Habu, right? They've worked with other vendors too. And we'll get into the use cases, but Peter and Brian, it's a lot of the use cases you guys are familiar with, right? If you think about data-driven marketing, it's a lot of the same tactics around planning and measurement and insights and personalization and targeting. It's just doing it in a privacy-safe way, which is better for data owners, it's better for brands, and it's better for consumers too. And so yeah, that's a little bit of like what Habu does. And, I think I'll turn it over in a second to Greg, but I think when we think of the world, Peter, it's really there's people who have sort of a lot of data that someone might want access to. Think Kroger, who's got a lot of loyalty data, and then think, Pepsi wants to get access to that data, right? And so those are like the two stakeholders when you think about data collaboration.
And Greg, sort of a follow-up question that builds on that a little bit, which is that look, I've seen your team present on clean rooms before, and it's excellent. You're clearly a leader in this space as well as in other spaces. But since you're the head of innovation for Pepsi's data and analytics, in addition to being chief sign switch turner offer, so congratulations on the promotion. Can you talk a little bit about Pepsi's innovation philosophy as it relates to data and technology in general, as well as to clean rooms specifically?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think the most important thing to comment on, Brian, is we are decidedly focused on where possible meets practical, right? So it's easy to get lost in the shiny object, tinkering with the latest tech, and you lose sight of what is valuable, or why are we doing this? How are we driving value to the org? We did a POC, right? I read something like someone made a comment about I've got more pilots than an aircraft carrier. Right, like that's something that we strive to avoid, and so we're decidedly focused on a small handful of key initiatives. And I think just as far as the philosophy, what my team does is, PepsiCo is an organization that is not new to being really good at brand advertising and excellent distribution, right? And so what I see as a privilege that my team has is just helping make sure we stay in that place, right? So we're leveraging our experience. I come from the ad tech space, and so I understand a lot of the kind of the plumbing, and I've been involved in a lot of sort of this evolution of the ecosystem and how data flows and some of the buzzwordy type stuff that gets a lot of people's attention, but then you lose sight of the value, right? And so I think, as Matt mentioned, I'm delighting in the fact that we're at a point in the industry now where we're dealing with signal loss, right? So some of the scaffolding that got us to where we are, which is great, is finally starting to be, removed for good reasons, both to the, especially to the consumer, but also just for the ecosystem at large. And my team's focused on leveraging latest technology to embrace marketing return on investment and, connectivity, interoperability across the ecosystem.
Thank you for that, Greg. So let's move on to what you're doing now around the clean rooms. PepsiCo has decided to license its own clean room. Would like to understand your thought process around doing so, how you looked at what was out there and available, and to some degree what made Habu so appealing as a partner to help you in this effort.
For those of us who've been in the ad tech space, you joke about remember the year of mobile that lasted for a decade, and so we had this, everyone's talking about clean rooms, and especially around the time that we built the DNA group at PepsiCo, the clean room was, it still is, but at that point it was this sort of mystified conversation topic where everyone's talking about clean rooms, but no one's actually doing anything with clean rooms, right? That was sort of our viewpoint. And so what we said is, look, we certainly want to be part of that conversation, but only if we can add value to the org, right? And so we were very deliberate in understanding how a clean room can add value to PepsiCo, right? And so we are, decidedly agnostic with the clean room space. What we've done with Habu is effectively they've leaned in the hardest with us, right? And so what we've done is said, hey, we're going to push the boundaries here and understand how we can become connected into various parts of the ecosystem with our media partners, with our retail partners. And as those spaces are becoming a little more blurry, the clean room represents a big opportunity for us to just be more collaborative and avoid things like the data standoffs that I've experienced, right? Like, we all have to have our first party data. Ooh, it's got a first party data. Well, it's my first party, your first party. Are we going to fight over data? Who's going to put it in their cloud? These kind of things. And so it basically just eliminated a lot of those sort of conversations that can become counterproductive and say, look, we got a clear path to do something. Now what do we want to do? And so, this quest for, as the marketing opportunities for us, right, as consumers' consumption habits of media, as well as, commerce habits, right? Of course, COVID has boosted our, e-commerce and, delivery and these type of, buy online, pick up in store, all these things that are, we're just trying to keep up with the consumer shift, the landscape shift for the consumer. And so being able to eliminate the sort of roadblock of whose data is it and how do we share it conversation through the power of clean rooms open up a lot of opportunity for us. And so specifically around marketing ROI is where we decided to lean in first.
And Matt, from your vantage point, because you can kind of see the industry as a whole. One, how does Habu make sense out of all this to people? I mean, I could share with you my Amish prom metaphor for a clean room, but we can save that for another time. Just as a way to try to get people to understand basically what it is. But also, what are you seeing from your side in terms of how prepared are most companies to be able to have this conversation, and what are some of the important elements in being able to use clean room technology effectively that you think companies need to bring to the table to be able to leverage this new tech most effectively?
Well, how do you make sense? I mean, I think Peter already confused listeners by calling it a safe room up front. I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's funny. A lot of vendors have these different little fortressy type words for their clean room environment. And in some ways, I feel like clean room's a misnomer, Brian, because we're not actually putting the data into a room, right? That's kind of a legacy approach that some of the ID vendors do. But Pepsi's invested heavily in their own cloud infrastructure. They have a lot of really strong engineers, and they're interested in us sort of reading the data from their cloud environment. They're not interested in sort of copying the data and moving it around. And that's going to be a major trend, I think. It was a bet we made early. But I think it's going to be a major trend in the software world as a lot of companies are investing in their own cloud infrastructure. In terms of just making sense, first of all, the concept's been around for a long time, right? For those of you in database marketing and whatnot, crosswalks, like these other things, if you're in legal M&A, you put the data in a clean room. But like in marketing and digital advertising, it really did start with Google, right? In 2015, when Google stopped sharing log level data with measurement providers and with targeting providers and people like that, right? And Ads Data Hub became their clean room. And if Pepsi, who advertises a lot with Google, wanted to work, with their media data, they had to work with inside of Ads Data Hub, which it's on top of Google, right? And so by the nature of that, and Amazon and Facebook have sort of followed suit, brands have to work in these environments if they want to work with their media data. So I think it's really important, Brian, to distinguish between a walled garden, like a media company sort of clean room versus your own clean room. And then so if we take the media walled garden clean rooms and put them to the side, and then it becomes, okay, is it Pepsi's clean room or is it, say, like Kroger's clean room, right? And that's where it gets a little bit confusing for people, because I think some people are like, wait, do I need to own this or do my partners own it? How does it actually work? And that's where I think Pepsi went on the offense a little bit, Brian, where they basically said, hey, as I think about my data strategy, as I think about the different stakeholders I have to support from a data analytics perspective, what does my technology stacks need to look like? And in this world where data is distributed, how should I be thinking about it, right? And so, I think the one thing, Brian, which I think would serve our entire industry well, would be if people realized there wasn't a silver bullet. And people would also think that there's clarity out there, because there's not clarity, right? I mean, there's legislation pending in 14 states around consumer data right now, right? And so I think the best way to make sense of it is to actually have a learning agenda and try stuff and do stuff, because you learn by doing. And that's what Pepsi did 3 years ago. So are people prepared? Sure. You prepare if you take a crawl, walk, run approach. But that would be my perspective. And I think that leading companies, whether it's a leading retailer, a leading CPG, a leading connected TV company like Disney, the companies that I think, NBCU, the companies that are sort of leaning in and doing stuff, I think are the ones sort of creating a competitive advantage for themselves.
Yeah. One thing I'd maybe just add on the question about sort of why PepsiCo decided to license our own clean room is, ultimately we did sort of like, can we build our own clean room? Like we did an internal look at, is this something we can build? And I think my opinion that, luckily was adopted was, it's an escrow, right? And I think, Brian, I'm familiar with your metaphor as a listener to this podcast, but, it's escrow, right? So you need sort of an independent third party to manage this, right? So to Matt's point about like, if we say, hey, cool, we got this cloud structure, well, then it still creates a bit of tension, right? Even with, all parties above board, of course, but it still creates some type of tension. So decidedly having, this sort of cloud escrow account was a big part of why we leaned in with the commercial players.
Well, and yeah, Greg, I'd be curious. Sorry, but I'd be curious for your point of view on that, because it seems like this question about who owns the clean room almost defeats the purpose of a clean room, right? Like, I mean, the real goal of a clean room is how you use it, not who owns it, right? So, so that because you're trying to bring data sources together, and the neutrality of a third party owning it, there's some real virtue to that, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
And it's interesting, Brian. Like, I think our most innovative customers, or at least the ones who are having the most success, are the people who start with a use case in mind. What's the end result? It's not like, hey, I want to buy a clean room, right? And it's the same with any technology. Like we saw with DMPs. Hey, I want to buy a DMP. Like, why? Oh, I want to buy a CDP. Sure, why? Right? And so it's the same thing with clean rooms. Like, don't just issue an RFP and say you want a clean room and ask 70 questions. Like, what do you actually want to get? What's your desired outcome? And then how can the technology enable that? And that's where I think, Pepsi was smart, where they had a lot of different outcomes and fire tested the technology to try to achieve them.
All right. So to that end, Greg, I'd love to hear, and I know our audience would love to hear about some of those intended outcomes that a clean room would enable PepsiCo to achieve. Maybe you have one or two examples of things you've done and how the outcome you desired was or was not achieved.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's really two examples that come to mind. One of which is we were able to put, and this is where, Habu really leaned in with us. We were able to put clean room at the forefront of building out some global ad targeting capabilities, right? So we went into areas where, we're a global company. We have some, large business in some surprising markets that we were able to bring in data sources from different areas that are kind of harder to find, maybe harder to work with. You're dealing with different international, regulations and, stuff that I think is, again, all good things and necessary progress, but something that you need to make sure you're handling properly. So we're able to leverage Habu's clean room technology to help us stand up some sort of audience insight and targeting applications for internal marketing use on a global scale, and do that, in a relatively, quick turnaround, kind of turnkey process. So that was how we got sort of a quick win and built momentum with, again, leaning into the use cases. And so what I'm really excited about that we're doing now is leveraging, sort of a cross-platform optimization initiative where we're taking a look at not just sort of measurement, but how do you get a granular signal on the connection between an advertising exposure across multiple channels to an actual purchase offline and online, right? And then not only how do you see that and sort of, on a historic look back, but how do you take those signals out and, near real time and plug them back into the media investment, right? So the same way you can make optimizations on the fly within a DSP, being able to apply this, using the term real time pretty generously here, but on a faster cadence, be able to pull more granular signal, creative level, audience level, what's tying to actual purchase, and plug that back into a campaign deployment, mid-flight. And I think what's very exciting about this is someone who grew up in the ad tech space and suffered through click-through as a metric for non-search, moving away from proxies and into purchase-driven, ties to performance. And we think of sort of a cross-channel ROAS is really what we're striving for. We made some meaningful progress.
That's helpful, Greg, to share some of those applications with us. I want to remind our audience that we're speaking with Matt Kilmartin, co-founder and CEO of Habu, and Greg Carr, head of data and analytics innovation at PepsiCo. Brian?
And then, Greg, just two things. One, can you just explain a little bit more for people that may not be as immersed in this as you are, like, say, me? What are the what's the difference between a proxy and the other thing you were describing? Like, what's the and then I got a follow-up question after that. But just walk through that a little bit more so people get a better sense of what you're talking about there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the term, like, sort of the proxies for measurement, I think ultimately what we care about it, and look, it's probably never going to be a perfect science, but using a purchase signal, right, tying through to, did this person buy this or not, right? Did they buy it through an e-commerce channel? Did they get it delivered? Did they go into a store and buy it? Getting as close to the source of truth of that and tying it back to ad exposure to understand how media drove sales results is what I care about, right? What I've been, and I think I'm particularly motivated for this because of growing up in the ad tech space and being largely on the tech side and the publisher side, where campaign performance is driven by faulty metrics, right? So I mentioned, click-through rate is great for search, and then we just sort of like stretched it into display and even video sometimes. Like, it's just like, guys, like, people don't click on things. That's not a real thing. And then it creates the rise of, bot farms and fraudulent activity that gets sort of, swept under the rug as long as it hits the performance goal, right? And so I'm actually just sort of like bitter about some of the direction that some of these faulty metrics has taken the industry. And so now we're at a point where I'm welcoming with open arms signal loss. Get rid of cookies. Like, let's get rid of the scaffolding that we built this, and let's get closer to consumer friendly environments where we have regulation that keeps everything above board. Consumers don't feel creeped out by tracking. They understand why they're sharing consent. They're giving an email address to get discounts, promos, etc. And it becomes a much more above board ecosystem for, I'm a consumer, right? Just like everyone else. So as a consumer, I think about my own personal experience with many brands that I'm happy to share my email address if I understand the value, right? So this whole quest for first party data, as long as it's above board, can make a lot of sense. Now, what we've done, Brian, to your question of proxies, right? Like, we've been, I think I bucket it all in the scaffolding of the industry, right? I'm not necessarily saying it was necessary to get us to where we are now, but let's move forward, right? So scaffolding, like even viewability scores and things like that, like an ad should be viewable, right? Like, so these type of things where I'm excited about what we're able to do now. And again, we're dealing with cohorts and we're modeling and we're certainly keeping things privacy safe and, and we'll never get a true deterministic one-to-one match on a purchase signal for the most part. But the fact that we can work in that space and tie more closely than ever before to a purchase-driven attribution across all channels is something that we're really leaning in on for good reason.
No, that makes sense. And then to build on that a little bit, what are some of the new resources you've needed on your end in order to bring this to the table apart from the clean room platform? Is it analytic capability? Is it investment in tech on your end that supplements what you're doing from a clean room perspective? Is it investments in data? What are some of the new resources that you need to be able to do this well?
Yeah, there's some of all the above. I think we're fortunate at PepsiCo. The strategic direction is really benefiting us, where the data and analytics group is, like I mentioned at the top of the show here, we've grown rapidly, right? And so what we're focused on, particularly in this space, is my team is sort of a cross-functional, we ad tech plumbers and, media data, MarTech background, but we work closely with our data science team who's helping bring a lot of this to life, applying modeling capabilities. We have data engineering resources. We have operational resources. We're working, across multiple clouds. We're collaborating across multiple parts of the ecosystem. We have a MarTech lead that works very closely with us and helps sort of scale these initiatives across the brand owners and the budget holders and the organization within. So it's really cross-functional, and it's kind of grown and morphed, and but it's a large team effort. And I think as far as data, there's we have internal data sources. We have data partnerships with some of the the major sort of category panel, et cetera, that help us, to point of sale data, receipt scan data, panel, et cetera. So these type of, connecting, media exposure data, working with our key media partners, connecting retail data, both from, our retail partners as well as some of the, aggregate, and bringing that all together to drive more sales, which is good for everyone in the ecosystem, is basically, I think, kind of what's coming to life in this, what we call the XPO initiative, cross-platform optimization.
I think the one thing I'd add, actually, Brian, if you don't mind, is, not every company might have like the resources of a Pepsi, right? Like if you're a Greek yogurt brand and you don't have the same sort of chops as Pepsi, you might be listening to saying, what do I do, right? And not to fill your bucket, Greg, but I think your agency, and there's other agencies out there as well who are bringing some of these capabilities to bear for their clients, right? And they're bringing data science resources to bear. And, not all agencies out there are out there pushing their own tech stacks. A lot of them are happy to sort of play the role of consultant and data analytics layer, kind of like you'd get from a BCG or Accenture. And so there are a lot of great agencies out there, partners as well, who do a lot of work in this as well. So if you don't sort of have the same resources that a Pepsi might have, there are companies out there that can add value as well. So I thought I might just share that as well.
Thank you for that, Matt. And Greg, while I'm tempted to ask you what type of a plunger an ad tech plumber uses, I think I'm going to focus more.
A tiny one.
Yeah, exactly. A very, very, very small one. But I would love to talk to you about partnerships in particular to access all this data. So PepsiCo works obviously with a myriad of omni-channel retailers. You work, I know from my time working on site at PepsiCo, you have partnerships with sports leagues and franchises and all sorts of other types of companies. Can you talk a little about how you think about partnerships at PepsiCo and how this technology can play a role in maximizing the value of those investments and relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that we've really only scratched the surface on at this point. But to your point, I mentioned earlier, like PepsiCo's we've got a ton of great sponsorships with all the sports leagues, right? So we do a really good job there. It's a great area of focus. As we're all in the ecosystem, PepsiCo as a group of wonderful brands and of course our sports league partners are trying to better understand our consumers and personalize an experience for consumers, give consumers what they want. We're doing a major World Cup sponsorship and, among others, right? That's just one that's sort of hot right now. But the better understanding of consumer trends, consumer viewing habits, consumption habits, working together to understand what, products delight our, customers while watching games, the game experience, the travel experience, the tailgate experience, et cetera. We're all kind of like, I think I hope we're all moving past this, like just clamoring for first party data and settling back into we care mutually about a customer experience and how can we work better together to, in a very compliant, privacy safe, above board way, share intel on consumer trends, right? So viewing habits, favorite teams, sort of these type things versus product placement, and it works for how you move products, how you actually move, snacks and drinks in the market. It moves for how you advertise, how you decide on creative, how you pair up, an event like a World Cup with a product sponsorship, with creative messaging, with channels to deploy across, right? Where you get better impact and intel, using that signal in a collaborative fashion, which would not have really been possible, a few years ago. Is something that we've, again, really just scratched the surface on, but are excited to lean into with co-promos and these type of things.
And as a follow-up to that, Greg, I think it's pretty transparent to this audience. I work at Fetch Rewards, and everyone who knows Fetch knows that they partner very closely with PepsiCo in providing you data sets. It would be interesting for me to know just a little bit about how you think about valuing. You said not all first-party data is necessarily of the same value. How you determine that there is value in a data that you want to try and go after that and then use a clean room technology to append it to your set to get better, as you made reference to, signals that can help you do actionable activities to drive engagement with consumers.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's where you can have a healthy debate, right? Because I think there's a mindset of like, we just give me all the data, right? We have to just sort of like, pull in all the data no matter what without really thinking about the value, right? And so I kind of take a counter approach of let's be very, particularly with, with an eye on sort of, consumer experience, what matters, right? What do we really care about? And what it comes down to for me is, and maybe this is just, being a sort of someone who's been in the ad tech space too long, but at the end of the day, all I really care about is, are you buying the product or not? Right? That's all I really care about. Everything else is, can be useful for segmentation and profiling, this type of things. But at the end of the day, you got purchasers and you got people that might purchase. And so, as someone who grew up in a space where I've seen a lot of junk and sort of, audience targeting and, some of these silly segments that, kind of get popped into, marketing campaigns. I think the meaningful signals are actually, there's things like location. Location really matters, right? Presence of children matters because you're buying a different, I have 3 kids in the house. So my cabinet is Quaker Oats, Life Cereal, Gatorade, right? And that is meaningful, when we're targeting versus maybe someone who's more of a soda drinker, gamer lifestyle, right? So I think there are meaningful signals that if you're sort of, disciplined about it, there's brands that associate with gamers, there's brands that associate with parents, there's, these kind of things. And we, having the fortune of being, a portfolio of wonderful brands with different consumer profiles, that's helpful. But then I think you can kind of go nuts with it and get a little too far into like, well, we need to know, there's other things that I think are basically, it hits a, sort of diminishing returns. And that's where I'm just trying to be sort of cognizant of as we, build out our data set.
Brian, what I hear Greg telling me is that while I was going to build a TikTok video to try and curry his favor, really all I need to do is go out and buy a box of oatmeal and he'll be happy with me. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah.
I'm actually feeling bad about myself because I have 4 kids and my stack cabinet's not as healthy as Greg's. I'm driving revenue for some of those other products.
Yeah, I have no kids, and my snack cabinet's not as healthy as Greg's, but that's a different problem. I have 2 kids, but they're not too much. So, anyway, apart from snack cabinet consistency, Matt, when you look at the rest of the CPG landscape, is this type of application consistent with what you see other companies doing? And you were going down this path before too, but I'd be curious for how you're seeing brands that don't have Greg, basically, right, and his team. But because there are a lot of brands in the world that I think could use clean room technology today, but that just don't have anywhere near the analytic horsepower that a Pepsi does. How are you seeing brands like that approach the ecosystem, and what are they doing that's working?
Yep. So to answer your first question, are we seeing mass adoption or how are we seeing it adopted? I'd say in pockets. And I'd say we're still, the whole life cycle of adoption of any new technology that Jeffrey Moore sort of put out. I'd say we're still with the early adopters, right? Like I think Pepsi's very innovative. We have other clients like L'Oreal's very innovative. We're like with the innovative early adopters. And I think we're starting to sort of get across that chasm to the early majority. But, and I think there's certain things happening in the industry, Brian, which will definitely sort of cross that chasm. Google just announced 2 weeks ago, this new initiative called PAIR, which is stands for Publisher Advertiser Identity Resolution, where Google now is not interested in getting involved from a data perspective between publisher and advertiser. They've partnered with us and some other clean room vendors as we're going to be the ones who creates that ID link between publisher and advertiser. So when you see like behemoths like Google, who so much of the control the media spend moving that direction, that's going to tilt the table. But I think the thing, Brian, that that we've experienced as a company is this whole notion of like, what comes first, right? Like, do you have supply of data that someone really wants? Because, without supply of data, who's going to demand it? Or sometimes the supply of data says, well, who wants my data, right? So it's a little bit of like an interesting network dynamic. I think what will push some of the people that don't have like the horsepower like a Pepsi or not push, but make the technology more valuable to them will be sort of the supply of data, right? And so like Kroger, for example, 8451, they're a customer of Habu. They have multiple data products inside of 8451, in addition to KPM, which is their, retail media business. They also, have a product called the Collaborative Cloud. And, of course, the Pepsis and the Procter & Gambles and like those guys with that horsepower will show up with their data scientists and do a bunch of that work. But Kroger's also thinking about how do I serve, other brands, right? And in those worlds, those people might just need reports, right? They might need more of a package BI layer to overlay some data with Kroger's retail data. And so I think that innovative brands like Kroger and other Albertsons and people like that that have a lot of supply of great loyalty data and whatnot, Fetch Rewards as well as a company, are these are the kind of people who can democratize access when you don't have the army of people that obviously Pepsi has on the data analytics side. So that's my perspective on that one, Brian.
All right, so let me start with Greg, and then Matt, you can probably follow on from your perspective. But you guys have built a really powerful partnership here. What excites you most about what you're able to do and where you're going together?
Yeah, I think where I'm, there's a lot, right? But I think probably what's maybe front and center is the landscape shifts that I am fascinated by. We talked a lot about this sort of focus back on the consumer, depth of scaffolding, right? Like moving to better signal. Pair that with the rise of the retail media category, right? So you have that is at a point where you got real things happening. The adoption is still very early days. And that space is a lot of fun to watch. You've got acquisitions, you've got retail media networks popping up literally everywhere. And there will certainly be some bundling and, these type of things. But as the retail players and the media players start to bend into the same space, that's something I'm really excited about to see how that grows up. And we're really just at the beginning of that.
Matt?
I think it's the drive towards innovation, Peter. I think that when we first started talking to Pepsi, 2.5 years ago, we probably never dreamed of some of the things we would be doing with them, and they continue to sort of push us. They're a demanding client, but those things make you stronger. And so that's, I think, what I enjoy the most, Greg, about the partnership is that not so much where we've been, but really where we're going. And I think some of the new capabilities in terms of running machine learning models on distributed data sets and whatnot is very innovative. And I think it's that sort of, value-driven innovation, co-innovation together is what has me most excited about the partnership.
And then Matt, I'll build on that a little bit. Prior to that, I'll announce that my kids have opened a lemonade stand that they're very proud of, and they're going to be opening a retail media network attached to that lemonade stand in the driveway. So they've partnered with BCG on a multi-million-dollar ad campaign platform to serve that. But getting back, Matt, to what you were saying earlier about what you're excited about, where do you see this 3 to 5 years from now? What does this market look like? In particular, what looks different about this marketplace 3 to 5 years from now than it looks today? And then Greg, I'll ask you the same thing.
I'd say three things, Brian. One is mass adoption, right? Like I think that this is, and there's some really interesting work I think that we're doing right now on the Clean Room Primer series, because at the end of the day, if you're Pepsi, you want to wake up and log into 20 different clean rooms, right? And so these things need to be interoperable, right? And so I think that distributed sort of data is here to stay, and I think applications like ours. I think the new ecosystem around data-driven advertising will be rebuilt on this type of technology. So mass adoption is sort of one thing. I think the other big thing will be around. I sort of hinted at it, but more around. Think about it more sort of horizontal machine learning applications, right? So Pepsi obviously investing, like a lot of CPGs, investing a lot of first-party data. By the way, I think everyone should invest in first-party data. Any consumer that's going to raise their hand, develop their relationship with you, 100% do it. But there's a scale, there's a ceiling, and this is a natural evolution of where's it go next. And I think that being able to let's just stop talking about match rates and overlaying audiences. How do you actually run data science on other people's data sets, right? And I think Cleanroom is really infrastructure to be able to provide some of those use cases. So I think that'll be another one. And the one that I'm the most excited about, Brian, was I went to I don't know if Some of the LiveRamp guys have actually started a company now in the healthcare space, and they held their version of Ramp Up called the Future of Healthcare Data down in DC. And, one of the trends in clinical drug trials right now is real world data. They call it RWD. And wouldn't, as you're doing a clinical drug trial around a new drug, wouldn't it be awesome to know what people are eating at Kroger or what people are eating from Pepsi? And those type of data signals can help improve health outcomes. And so I think that's maybe that's 10 years out, but 3 to 5 years, I think we're starting to see some use cases in the healthcare vertical, which I think are pretty interesting. And so, yeah, I'm super excited about the category and honored to be able to work with market leading companies like Pepsi and other clients. So thanks.
Greg, how about you? What do you think will be most different 3 to 5 years out?
Yeah, and I think, maybe just to kind of build on what Matt said, I think the better understanding, sort of demystification, right? So I think I heard someone say one time, AI is what we just bucket, everything that we don't understand yet, we just bucket into AI, right? So it's sure, just whatever we don't really quite understand yet. And I feel that is absolutely, what's going on here, right? And so we have a situation where I think people are, fortunately, a lot of people across a lot of spaces are perked up by what is a clean room? What are we doing? How do we share data? What's first party data? What's third party data? These kind of things. So there's a lot of good momentum, but there's still sort of, this everything's kind of mysterious. We don't have a common parlance. And so I think as we work through some of those challenges, and again, it comes back to if we lead with use cases, that helps cut through so much of these challenges, right? Okay, what did you do? Okay, I get that. Cool. You made it happen via this technology. Yeah, cool. Doesn't really matter. Bottom line is we understand what you did now. It brings it to the forefront. So I think that's really our philosophy and where we're trying to drive the ball, 3 to 5 years, getting to a more common understanding of how we engage, what we can do together across, different spaces that we're working in. Matt's example about healthcare is fascinating, right? Because it doesn't have to be capped with just sort of the, retail media ecosystem. We've got just tons of runway, but again, in 3 to 5 years, I'm excited about a better common understanding of what's possible, and how it's beneficial, and then how we can apply that to more and more use cases in a common parlance.
To our audience, please visit cpgguys.com where you can find all of our content. There's a ton of it there, episodes, links to other resources. It's all free other than our swag store. You got to pay for that, but everything else is free. And if you think you or your company has some thought leadership to contribute to this big discussion, the community we're creating, drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com. There's a link in the hyperlink to the show liner notes, and maybe you can join us on this podcast like Matt and Greg did. Don't forget to drop us a rating through the navigation bar at the top of cpgguys.com. And of course, thank you to the 17,000 plus followers of the CPG Guys on LinkedIn. We greatly appreciate your trust, and we're happy to generate this content to both educate and to entertain you. Matt, Greg, want to thank you both for this tremendous conversation about how clean rooms are enabling disparate data sets to come together, create meaningful signals, and drive engagement with consumers, getting them to buy more of your products. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Peter and Brian. Really enjoyed the conversation, and special thanks for Greg for doing this and sharing so much detail around what you guys are actually doing. I think it's the actual use cases which are the most helpful for listeners. So thanks for joining today.
Well, great. Thanks so much, guys. Great to be here. Really appreciate it.
Yep. And all the details on today's guests are going to be found in the digital liner notes for the podcast episode, available wherever you get your podcasts. So,
Brian, summary thoughts on today's episode?
Quite a few. One, I'm markedly smarter now than I was 45 minutes ago or so. So thank you, gentlemen, for both leading the way and being incredibly clear about how you were doing that, which I thought was great. I think there's a couple of things in here. Greg, there's a couple of phrases in here I'm just going to flat out steal about where possible meets the practical, and also this notion of avoiding the aircraft carrier syndrome of having more pilots than an aircraft carrier, and I think one of the things you said about 9 times, so I got it about time 8. was starting with a use case and not with the technology, and really understanding what the business application is you're trying to solve, and then figuring out what the data strategy is that supports the business application, and then building around it, which I thought was really powerful. I thought the idea of the clean room as escrow, which is less colorful than an Amish prom, but probably more accurate, and the role that the kind of essential role that a third party like Habu plays in that process for being a trusted, sort of a trusted third party involved in the system to allow two parties to come to the table in an equal way, because that is sort of the whole point of this. I thought the example around purchase signals and proxies was a really good one for understanding what the potential is here, which is taking down the scaffolding, a phrase you used several times, Greg, to be able to just say, well, we're pretending to know stuff in digital now. Let's actually know it by combining data in new ways to get ourselves closer to the actual answer. And getting closer to the actual answer does two things. One, it reduces the potential for fraud in the measurement system because you're actually closer to the thing that you're actually trying to measure rather than a proxy for it, and the proxies are easier to fraud. And secondly, it improves the caliber of the modeling that goes around it. And I think there's a really open question that's on the table around how marketing mix models need to evolve in the future to take account of all this and how this data is going to fuel that. And getting better signals into the marketing mix model is absolutely critical. And if this is a way to do that, there's almost no amount of money you could spend where improving your marketing mix model by 10 or 20% isn't worth the spend, right? Just given how much money flows through that model. So I thought that was interesting. Matt, I like the notion of the pair thing. I thought was really an interesting observation for the types of steps that even companies like Google are taking to get out of owning personally identifiable data around people, and the way in which clean rooms solve the problem in a world in which nobody wants to own that data. And I think, Greg, you pointed out that the regulations around this, particularly in Europe, are stringent and onerous if you fail. I spent 22 years of my life at a data company, so I'm pretty familiar with the fact that GDPR is in fact a 4-letter word. So I can say that, you guys can't. I thought, Matt, the idea that we're getting to mass adoption here and that being the future, I thought was really powerful. And that crossing the chasm metaphor from the innovators to the early adopters, and that at mass adoption, we're at a place where this is part of how we work. So I thought this was great. So thanks.
Brian, thank you for your observations, and also thank you for stepping in to co-host this episode.
We did talk about retail media, so I'm happy. We didn't say iROAS in it.
I know,
but I feel like I tried to represent Tree as best I could.
You did your very best. And to our audience, I want to thank you for joining us on this episode. We look forward to speaking with you on a future episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Goodbye. The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.